We're going to talk about what make marriages work with Chrissy and Al.
I think that the number one key is communication. If you don't have communication in a marriage, it's going to fail. And communicating is an intimacy of everything. That encompasses everything. He thinks I probably communicate too much because in the morning when we get up, I'm like, babe, what we eat for dinner tonight? Like literally, like I'm thinking ahead. He's like, can we get to lunchtime first? We have children, so communicating as far as our 7 children, what's going on with them, our personal lives as far as personal work. You know, I'm a registered nurse. He's a dean. He's a pastor. So intertwining our lives to become one, that takes work, and through that is communication.
Okay.
Yeah, I would agree. That is definitely a level of communication that is essential for any marriage, any relationship period to grow. You got to be able to communicate. You have to be able to talk. But I also think the posture in communication, and I would say for me, that's the biggest thing I learned. In marriage, for me, I had to learn because I think naturally, I'm a communicator, so I can kind of talk. What I had to learn was how I communicate, her language of communicating, because the way I may communicate to my boys, the way I may communicate to another individual is not necessarily the way I need to communicate to my wife. And so I've also learned that communication isn't always verbal. Sometimes it's just paying attention to her body language. Paying attention to what she's not saying. That's a form of communicating. So I would definitely highlight with my wife that for us, communication plays a huge role in a healthy marriage.
Walk us through your marriage.
Well, interestingly enough, there is a part of my life that requires me to be on the road, and as an artist and as a pastor. And so I would say, again, learning how to communicate that, involving her in my life. Probably, I think that's not only has been a challenge, in some ways it's still a challenge. Just the way I'm made up, I kind of just do things. I kind of just go, get it done. And so walking through our marriage now, I believe that God has been taming me, whether it's due to COVID, because even in this season, there has just been things that have happened out of my control that have forced me to leverage, to think differently as it relates to my wife and I, and how we communicate, how we do our day-to-day activities as a family. Where before, I think it's safe to say that we were just so easy to kind of do our own thing, but yet we're together, if that makes sense. It's like, almost like living separate lives, but still together. We're living separate lives, but married. And as long as there were certain agendas that were being met, we were cool with that. Where now we've learned to communicate, interact in a very different way, which I think has been even more healthy for our relationship.
One thing I can say that right now we have one vehicle. So the use of one vehicle requires us to communicate so much more. Our daily, like, what's going on for the day, Before, when we always had 2 vehicles. He'll just jump in the car and I'm like, oh, where are you at? He's like, oh, I'll be back. I'm running here, running there. Whereas now we actually communicate our week. Like, all right, well, I work this day, I have this going on again. So at first the one vehicle was like, oh my gosh. But it actually brought us together a lot closer, a lot more stronger, because we're able to know what's going on in each other's lives, and we're able to, just know that. Like, it was something, it drew us together. It drew us closer together.
As a registered nurse, I'm going to suspect that you probably endure other stressors outside of your marriage, especially now because of the the COVID-19. So how are you balancing that stress with your marriage, or is that stress helped in any kind of way?
It's the fact that I'm a registered nurse during this pandemic, and he's the dean, so it allows him to stay home with the children throughout the day while I'm at work. It alleviates some stress. The fact that I know that children are there with him. At times, I have to call him, like, did the boys clean their room? Making sure those little subtle things to make sure I don't.
Lunch.
Yeah, they eat lunch to make sure that I don't come home. I don't know, because it's funny how he said about communication doesn't have to always be words, because if I come home and like the house is a hot mess, just my attitude, like how I look, you could tell I'm not in a good mood. Like, why am I coming home and everything is a mess? And he'll be like, I'm like, babe, look at this. And he's like, it's not that bad. His not that bad to me is very bad. Like, I'm like, it's dishes in the sink. It's all this here, coming home. We have kids that can clean this. Like, all you gotta do is delegate the stuff to get done. So, but working as a registered nurse, it becomes during this quarantine and pandemic it can be stressful. Making sure I don't bring anything home to my children and my husband. Making sure that I do a lot of taking my stuff off before I get in the front door, having things ready so I could change, making my kids want to come to me right when I get home, mommy. I said, don't touch me. And so, I take my clothes off and, get a shower and stuff, just trying to make sure that they stay safe. So it's not as stressful as the single parent or the two parents are working during this pandemic. It would be a lot more stress if he still had, like, not saying he's a non-essential worker, but if he had to work every day, like I did, it would be much stressful, because the kids have a lot going on with the Zoom, their circle time, like they're required to be online and stuff. So he helps out a lot, the days that I work.
Okay, what are your biggest fears?
My biggest fear for me has always been failing. That's always my biggest fear. That's the only thing I fear. I fear not being able to accomplish or perform what I was created to do. So I've always had visions in my heart and in my mind of things I was supposed to obtain and things I was supposed to do. And for me, the biggest fear is not meeting those expectations I've set for myself. If I'm honest, that's my biggest fear. It's that's just me being honest.
Me too, failing. Not being I feel I could be a better mother or a better wife, or I just I'm school to get my master's now, and I'm scared, like, I pray I get an A in this class, I gotta write these papers, this fear of not being the best Chrissy I can be, and that could be stressful. It could weigh on my shoulders a lot too. So I just try to just give it to God, pray, ask God to take these fears away, because you can't have fear and faith in the same heart, and just move on, and just know that every day is a new day. Every day is a new beginning, like new mercies every day. So I may have not did what I was supposed to do. I could have did more the day before, but the next day I could start over again.
Yeah.
So.
What's your biggest encouragement? The thing that causes you guys to stay married?
Our biggest encouragement?
Yeah.
That has caused us to stay married?
Yeah.
That's a great question. You want to answer first, or you want to think about your question?
Realistically, we have a lot together. We have a house, finances, like realistically, like.
Some leverage.
And now I'm just saying, literally, I mean, if you want to be on a literal point of view, like, I don't know how I could. Yeah, I don't know how I could make it right now without him, financially. But then we have children, and our children, I want them to be able to grow up with their mother and father, knowing they love each other. Like, we've been through a time of separation where we were separated for 9 months, and it was the worst time of my life, and I felt like it brought us closer together, but we learned a lot with that separation. It was a very difficult time, but we made it through. We're here. We're going on 11 years this year. So, we are a testimony, a true testament that God can really work things out.